pretty much all the Republican ads are just crime, 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 fear, fear, fear.
In a very close state, this could be a very, very powerful argument. Welcome to Political Experts React, where we break down political ads and media, explain what the people behind them are trying to accomplish, and decide whether or not they did a good job. I'm Dan Pfeiffer, former communications director for Barack Obama. Joining me today is chair of the Democratic Party of Wisconsin, Ben Wikler. Joining me right now is a man whose full-time job is saving democracy, Ben Wikler. Welcome to Political Experts React.
Thank you so much, Dan. Honored to be with you and your viewers.
We oftentimes do presidential races, Senate races. We dabble in some congressional races periodically. One thing we've never done before is a state Supreme Court race. We are here today to do a special episode on this incredibly important state Supreme Court race happening in your state. Ben, tell us why people all across the country should care about a state Supreme Court race in Wisconsin.
If you care about democracy in America, you should care about what happens in Wisconsin Supreme Court race on April 4th. In 2024, the state Supreme Court could try to overturn the presidential election results in the state that tips the entire country's electoral college majority. It could determine whether the ultra gerrymandered maps, which were picked by our state Supreme Court and have the biggest partisan bias of any maps in the country, whether we actually take a look at whether these gerrymandered maps are constitutional and strike down the gerrymander and open up a period of democracy in Wisconsin. This race will determine whether our near total abortion ban stays in place or whether we actually consider the laws that happened in the 20th century rather than the year 1849. So freedom in Wisconsin, but also democracy for everybody, hinges on what happens in this race.
All right, let's do what we do on the show. Let's look at some ads. We're going to start with one from Judge Janet Protasiewicz, who is running for the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Remember this, and the false elector scheme. In Wisconsin, extremist Dan Kelly was the right-wing lawyer behind the scenes of it all. The bipartisan January 6th Commission revealed Kelly advised Trump operatives as special counsel to overturn the will of the people and overthrow the election results. Kelly even went on tour promoting the big lie. On April 4th, vote like democracy depends on it, because it does.
So, Ben, we are more than 2 years removed from January 6th. Is this something that people care about? Do you think the voters in your state are going to hold Dan Kelly accountable for his role in January 6th?
This is profoundly motivating here. And I think it's motivating because, unlike in other states, it almost worked in Wisconsin. And people here remember that. There's this very real sense that we came close to overturning Wisconsin's election results. It has come out in drips and drabs over the last 2 years how the whole right-wing operation in our state conspired to pull off the fake elector scheme. We saw the January 6th committee come out with that record that showed that Dan Kelly was right in the middle of that whole thing. What the ad does is show the footage, remind people what it felt like, and then also show the sources that make it absolutely clear that Dan Kelly is democracy's foe. And if you believe in democracy, you've got to vote against him.
This ad is, I think, very well done for a lot of reasons, but there is a lot of evidence based on 2022 that candidates who believed and promoted the big lie fared worse than candidates who did not. There is a study from some Stanford researchers that looked at it and found that big lie promoting candidates actually got about 2% less of the vote share than other Republicans. And so in a very close state, this could be a very, very powerful argument, which I think is probably amplified by the fact that it's a Supreme Court seat, right? This is something that is directly connected to that, right? This is someone who is going to rule on the laws, who's going to rule on the election, right? It's why the crazy MAGA extremist Secretary of State candidates, Attorney General candidates fared so poorly in the states that Trump tried to overthrow the election, like Arizona, for example. And so, yeah, I think it's a very effective spot.
One other thing I'd add is, even after Arizona's famous Cyber Ninjas election audit was over, in Wisconsin, there was a special counsel investigation funded by the state legislature that was pushing all these totally bogus claims about the election. And ultimately, the leader of it called for the 2020 election to be retroactively decertified based on absolutely nothing. And Dan Kelly is plugged into that whole operation. This is non-ancient history for Wisconsinites. And so with that electorate specifically, it's highly motivating to do something that's so connected to democracy. You have to believe in democracy in the first place to make the trip to vote in an April election when there's no national news essentially about the fact the election's happening.
The next ad we're going to watch is from Dan Kelly, who is the Republican running for the seat.
Sheriffs like us from around the state are supporting Daniel Kelly for Wisconsin Supreme Court. Justice Kelly's opponent, Janet Protasiewicz, is a Milwaukee County judge with a long history of letting dangerous criminals back into our streets.
Directly undermining the work of our officers and putting your family at risk. We can't afford to have judges who put their own agendas above the law. It's time we start prioritizing justice again, not politics.
Vote Daniel Kelly for Wisconsin Supreme Court.
This is a pretty classic Republican ad. Republican sheriffs attacking a Democrat, calling him soft on crime or whatever else. Some of the national analysis of the most two recent elections in Wisconsin, the Mandela Barnes Senate race and then Joe Biden's very close victory in 2020, suggests that crime played a big role in those races. Is that your sense on the ground?
If you watch TV in Wisconsin in 2022 and this year, pretty much all the Republican ads are just crime, 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 fear, fear, fear. That's the whole thing. This ad was the law enforcement officers. The other ones show mugshots, which, to nobody's surprise, Republicans choose African-American offenders to show the mugshots in the fear of crime ads that they run. It is the case that this is probably their most powerful message, and it's the message they choose to use every single time. It's also the case that in the Senate race, once Mandela Barnes had ads in equal volume to the Republican ads, and his ads were focused on democracy and abortion, reproductive freedom, he was gaining rapidly on Ron Johnson. If we'd had another week, the trend line suggests he would have won that race. So it's probably the strongest shot that they have, but it's actually less strong than our message when you communicate at full volume on our side.
And there is, by all reports, an ungodly amount of money being spent on this race. Are Democrats at parity or communicating on par?
So I was just looking at a graph which shows that on the independent expenditure side, Republicans are cleaning our clocks, millions and millions of dollars funded by big lie, dark money groups. But the candidate side, we are cleaning their clock by a mile. But not only that, candidates by law get the lowest rate on TV ads. So when you look at the number of ads people see, we're up like 3-1 across the state. All those donations are disclosed. It is not dark money. So sorry, Republican dark money donors. But because we're basically making use of these laws Scott Walker created where the parties can receive unlimited donations and the party can make unlimited transfers to the candidate. And to be clear, Janet Protasiewicz has said that she would recuse herself if the Democratic Party is a party to a lawsuit that comes before the state Supreme Court, and I totally honor that. But it means that she has the resources to outcommunicate the other side, even though the dark money is flooding on the Republican side of the equation here.
This is a very important point that we should probably talk about on this show more, which is whenever political reporters or cable news hosts or people on Twitter talk about ad spending, they do it dollars. One side's spending $5 million, the other side's spending $7 million, but they never get into the actual details of how that money is spent. As you pointed out, candidates can get their ads at a lower rate than these dark money groups. That is a very important point. I think this is a totally cookie cutter Republican ad. Like we've seen 1,000 of these. They're relatively effective. This one feels pretty generic. It doesn't feel like it's really landing a bunch of specific blows on the Democrat.
If you watch the full spectrum of their ads, they're going ham on this thing. And it is just straight up full blast racial dog whistles. In Wisconsin, the word Milwaukee is often used by Republicans as a stand-in for black people. And so when they talked about how she's a Milwaukee judge, that had a particular significance in this state. The other thing I want to point to in that ad is that it actually has two messages that kind of contradict each other. Because the first part is like fear of crime, fear of crime, fear of crime. And then the second part is the claim that Janet is a politician, not a judge. He keeps making this argument because she says, look, I'll never prejudge a case, but you should know that my values are that abortion should be a question of personal freedom and your own choice over your own body. And that drives him up the wall because he doesn't want to answer that. But Dan Kelly is a Republican operative who was cashing checks from the Republican Party, and Janet Protasiewicz was a prosecutor and then a judge for the last 9 years. So he's trying to go after her strength, which is she actually has a record as an actual judge in the state.
Do you want a judge or do you want a political operative? And one of them tried to overturn the election in his full-time role as political operative. So there is an element of leading with the chin. All right, people. As you know, I've been doing this show for a long time. I'm just out here. I'm doing my job, just trying to help people understand campaign ads. And my friend, my Pod Save America co-host, the co-founder of the company that airs this show, is out here trying to pick a fight with me. Here's a man who worked in the Obama White House, runs a company, has multiple successful podcasts. In order to try to pick a fight with me, he commented on his YouTube video. Oh wow, does this blow that Dan Pfeiffer guy out of the water? More like campaign experts eat shit. Tommy, you're better than this. I'm not going to stoop to your level. I'm not going to get in the mud with you, if you will. I'm simply going to do my job, which is to do this video and kindly ask you all to smash the subscribe button. So thank you. And no thank you to you, Tommy. All right, last ad we're going to do here is from Donald Trump, because why not?
For those of you that didn't notice, Florida was doing great long before Ron DeSantis got there. People are fleeing from New York to Florida and other places because of high taxes and out-of-control crime. It's really bad. Not because of the governor. Thank you, Mr. President, for doing that. But it's not because of the governor. Florida was doing fantastically. You had a governor named Rick Scott who did a very good job. Even Charlie Crist, a Democrat, did a good job, and he had very good numbers. Sunshine and ocean are very alluring. It's not too hard to work with those factors. So just remember, Florida was doing really well long before Ron DeSantis got there.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack here.
No notes. Just the perfect piece of political communication.
I mean, I'm not going to ask you. I mean, you should feel free to, if you want, to comment on whether you think this is an effective ad among Wisconsin Republicans, who he will theoretically, Trump and DeSantis will, or DeSanctis or DeSanctimonious or Tiny D or Meatball Ron or whatever we're doing today, will compete for at one point. But just as a professional political operative who elects Democrats, who probably appreciate seeing Donald Trump do the ads like this, is that the case?
Yeah. I mean, keep everything about that constant. That'll be the election campaign. Donald Trump endorsed Dan Kelly from a rally in Green Bay, and he was surrounded by people waving flags and all this kind of stuff. He's famously obsessive about his image. The idea that he even allowed this ad to go up really suggests that he's lost a step. Also, DeSantis, like, is he using Latin for holy as his thing? Yeah.
I don't think he knows Latin. I'm just going to guess there. We just had to put this on here because it's just worth reminding people that Donald Trump remains a looming existential threat to democracy and everything else, that if Dan Kelly is elected, then Donald Trump's chances of being president, were he to become the Republican nominee, go up substantially. And that's why, if you are a person not in the state of Wisconsin who is watching this, you should care passionately about it. And I would just note one last thing, which is this is a video they could edit. It's not live. It's not an interview. He is standing in front of a teleprompter where he's theoretically could be reading words that someone wrote for him. And if at any point he says some weird thing, they could cut that out. So this is, theoretically, the best version of whatever it is he recorded. So just think about that for a second. But because we brought up Trump, because Donald Trump looms over this election happening in your state, if people, and I can't imagine how they wouldn't be, have been persuaded about the urgency of this race, how can they help elect Judge Janet in your state?
If you are watching Political Experts React, you want to help. You can help. Go to wisdems.org, wisdems.org. You'll find lots of links you can click to be able to chip in, volunteer, use every waking minute, and then we can celebrate the night of April 4th when the winner is called.
Ben, thank you so much. Everyone, go out there, do everything you can to help Ben, help the Democrats in Wisconsin, help win this race. Every little bit matters. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Dan.
Thanks for watching these ads and videos with us. If you have anything you'd like us to break down, let us know in the comments. See you all next time.